Hello developers, how are you? I hope you are doing well today. In this class, we'll be learning about CSS selectors. This class is a continuation of the last week's class where we learned about types of selectors. Now we are continuing learning about those types of selectors. So without much ado, let's dive in. If you have been following this course, you are aware of the repo that we forked. So you can just use the git pull command to get the latest notes. And if you are new, I'll provide the repo link in the video description so that you can clone the repo for you to get the latest notes. So now let's start learning about CSS selectors. If you pull the notes, you can see there's this folder here called 07 selectors. It has this readme file that contains the notes. And you can see also in day 2, we learned about selectors in day 2. Here we talked about, you can see that there are these four main categories of selectors. Here they are. I'll just copy this code. You can see that these 4 types of selectors. So in last week's class, we learned about these simple selectors. Today we learn about the combinator selectors, the attribute selector, and these pseudo, class, and element selectors. So I just paste these notes here, the one that I copied for the types. I can just paste them here like that, so that I can refer to the types as we talk about them. Also, let me close this one. Also, I'll create a new HTML file like that, and also another file of the style sheet. Then inside the HTML, I'll put my boilerplate there like that. Then I'll rename the title to CSS selectors. Then I'll add a link to my style sheet like that. So I'll save this code and I'll be good to go. I'll open my readme using this markdown previewer and I'll just close it. So you can see here, we can divide CSS selectors into 5 categories. In the notes here, you can see that the first category was the simple selectors that you already looked at it in the day 2. Day 2 of learning CSS, we looked at these simple selectors. We talked about the element selector, the ID selector, the class selector, the general selector, the universal selector, the grouping selector. We talked about them in the simple selectors. So today we'll be learning about these combinator selectors, the attribute selectors, and the pseudo, class, and element selectors. So you can see all of them are there in the notes. We'll be talking about these ones in today's class. So without much ado, let's dive in. So let's start talking about the CSS combinator selectors. So these combinator selectors, you can see in the notes, they select elements based on a specific relationship between them. So when we learned about HTML nesting, we talked about the parent-child relationship. I'll just remind you, we said you put here a parent element. I'll call this parent like that. Then inside that parent element, any element that you put inside the parent is a child. So a parent can have more than one child like that. This way. Yes, like that. So this is the parent element, and this inside the parent element, any element that is nested inside there is a child element. So you have seen that is a parent-child relationship. So there's this selector here. It's called a child selector. A child selector selects all elements that are children of a specified element, and use this greater than sign to denote the child selector. So for example here, I had a parent element that is a division or a divider, the div. Then I have some parent elements here. Let's have the paragraph for the parent. I'll just remove this other one. Let us have only one child to show the relationship. So I'll just type here and I'll just duplicate this paragraph and put another paragraph outside. This is another paragraph like that. So you can see I have 2 paragraphs. I'll save them. One is inside the div, the other one is outside the div. So if I want to select this paragraph inside this div, I can use a child selector to select that, because you can see this paragraph is a direct child of this div. So this div is the parent of this one. So if I want to select that paragraph, I can just come to the CSS and use this selector like that. You can see a div is the parent, then I can pull the child selector, then paragraph is the child. That is how I use the child selector. Then I can say the color is, let me just use the RGB that we learned yesterday. I can say it's, let me put it a blue color, so red will be 0, green will be 0, then blue will be 255. That will be a blue color like that. So I styled my paragraph using the child selector, and I set the color to be color blue. So let me go to the browser and see how this is. So if you go to the browser, you can see that this paragraph is blue in color, but the other paragraph is still black. So it's only styled there. Let me just inspect so that you can see. We only styled this paragraph that is inside the div. This other paragraph that is outside the div was not styled because you used the child selector to select this paragraph alone. And that is how you use the child selector. So let us look at the descendant selector. So when talking about the descendant selector, here it is. You have to know what is a descendant first. So I started with the child because we already talked about the parent-child relationship. So this is the parent and this is the child. That was just a recap for the HTML class where we talked about nesting. So this descendant is any element that is nested inside another element. It does not matter whether it's 3 levels deep or 2 levels deep. Let me give you an example. So here inside the div you have a paragraph, and maybe you can have another element like, let's say, a section like that. So inside the div you can have a paragraph and a section, let's say, for example. Then inside the section you can have, let's say, a h4, say fourth header. So you can see this paragraph is a child of the div, this section is a child of the div, but not this section is a parent of this h4. That means this h4 is a grandchild of this div. I think you're still following. This section is a child of the div, and also this section is a parent of this h4. So h4 is a child of the section, and also h4 is the grandchild of this div. That is the relationship between these elements. So that means this h4 is not a direct child of the div, but it is a descendant of that div. So if you want to select an element that is a descendant, for example, this h4 is a descendant of that div, you can use the descendant selector. Also, a child is also a descendant of the div. But let us look at how you can select this h4 first. So select this h4, you can use the descendant selector. The descendant selector is just a space. So I can go to the styles. I say div, then space, then h4. That we have selected the h4. What should I put? Let me also change the color of that h4 to be color. This time I'll use the hex, then just put random values there. I'm not sure which color is that. Just 6 values random, that color exactly. So this color, not sure which color is, it's a shade of green, I think. You have selected the h4 and you have put it to be that color. So let us go to the browser and see how that is. So if you go to the browser, you can see that we selected this h4 and we put it that shade of green color using the descendant selector. That means even if you had another h4, let's say you had another h4 that is not a descendant of a div. Let me try to edit this one. Edit as HTML. Then I add some h4 below it and say another header or another heading, but this h4 is outside the div. So you can see below the paragraph there's this h4 here called another heading. But now this h4 will not take these styles, because as you can see, you selected this h4 using the, you style this h4, you style it using the, where is it? Let me just put it up. Section h4. Here it is. You style the h4 using the descendant selector. Also, a child can be a descendant. In short, a descendant is any element that is nested inside a parent element. Any element, whether even you can use this you can style this section. You can see this section is a child of this div. If you want to style this section, you can use either the child selector or the descendant selector, because a child is also a descendant of that element. But a descendant is not a child. I think that is clear. A child is a descendant, but a descendant is not a child. So if you want to specify the child selector, you must use something that is a direct child. For example, this paragraph and this section. But if you want to use the descendant selector, you can use any element as long as it is inside that parent element, whether it's a child or a grandchild or a granddaughter or anything. You can just use the descendant selector. Just to clarify, a child is a descendant, but a descendant is not a child that way. So I think that is clear, and you know about the child selector and the descendant selector. So I'll just proceed. So the next element is this adjacent sibling and the general sibling selector. So let's talk about the adjacent sibling, but first you have to know what is a sibling first. So you have said that this paragraph is a child of the div, and also this section is a child of the div. So both this paragraph and the sections are children of the div. That means that paragraph and sections are siblings, because they share the same parent. That means they are siblings. So there's two types of siblings. There's the adjacent sibling and the general sibling. So adjacent siblings are siblings that are following each other. General siblings, as let's say I put another element here, let's say h6. I say learning CSS selectors. So you can see this paragraph with the reference. I'll use this first paragraph as reference. So if I'm using this first paragraph as reference, I'll say all these three, the paragraph, the section, and the h6, all of them are children of the div. So that means they are siblings. But this section is an adjacent sibling of the paragraph, because you can see in the notes it's saying that an adjacent siblings must follow it must be immediately following. This is the keyword, immediately following. So if a sibling is immediately following another sibling, that is an adjacent sibling. But you can see this h6 is not immediately following the paragraph. So this h6 is not an adjacent sibling to the paragraph, but it can be an adjacent sibling to the section, because it is immediately following the section. This h4 is not a sibling to any element for now, because this one you said it's a grandchild, unless you put another element inside the section so that the h4 can have a sibling. But now we're talking about this one. First, in fact, I'll just remove this section so that you cannot have any labels inside there. I think you've learned about the parent child, so now let's talk about the sibling. So I'll just remove the grandchild, and leave it like that. So you can see here we have just div and a div that has 3 children, and these children are siblings. So this paragraph is a sibling to h4 and also is a sibling to h6. All these three are siblings. But now, for you to define an adjacent sibling, it has to follow each other. You can see this paragraph and this h4, they are following each other. So these ones are adjacent siblings. But let me just comment this style so that it does not conflict, because we no longer have that. So I'll just comment it. So for you to show this, I'll just provide another tag here called the strong tag, so that you don't confuse. So I want to style this strong tag using the adjacent sibling selector. So I'll just select the paragraph like that. Then I'll put that sign. That sign is the one that is used to denote the adjacent sibling selector. Then I'll say the strong. That means that the strong tag, I'm selecting the strong tag that is adjacent to the paragraph. So even if we had another strong tag here, even if we had another strong tag here, let's say you have another strong tag here. So you can see you have, no, I'll just put it inside the div so that it can be a child but not a direct child. So you can see you have two strong tags. All of them, they are children of that div. You can see this strong tag is a child of this div, and also this strong tag is a child of this div. So if I want to select only this strong tag here, I can use the adjacent sibling selector. Because if I use the descendant selector, I'll select both the two. Then if I use the child selector, I'll select both the two. But if I select only one, I can use the adjacent sibling selector. So I can say P, that is strong, that is adjacent to the paragraph, like this. The strong that is adjacent to the paragraph. Then I can put the color to be, let's just put tomato or any color, yellow, green. So let's go to the browser and see how that is. So if you go to the browser, you can see that this strong tag here has that yellow green color, and the other strong tag is here. It does not have that style. But all these two strong tags, all of them were inside the paragraph. That means all of them were inside the div. All of them were children of the div. But we use the adjacent sibling selector to just select only one. So now let us talk about the general sibling selector. So for the general sibling selector, it's just any element as long as it is just a sibling. Like I can say all of these ones are siblings, so I can use any general sibling selector to select any element here. So I can just say P, then I use this tilde sign, then I select any element there. So you can select this H6 using the general sibling selector, because you can see it's not adjacent. That means it cannot be, they're not following each other, which means it cannot be the adjacent sibling selector, but it is a sibling that is not following each other. So you can use the general sibling selector to select this H6 or any other element here. I can also select this H4 or the strong, but I'll just select the H6. So you can come here to the styles and I'll say paragraph, then I'll put that tilde sign, then I'll say H6. This is the general sibling selector. So you can put the color to be blue violet like that. And it is not a must that you use the P. You can just use any element that is here, that the siblings together here. You can use the strong or the H4, but I chose to choose the paragraph. So let's go to the browser and see how that is. So if you go to the paragraph, to the browser, you can see that our H6 here has that styling applied. That means that if you had another H6 that is not inside is not a direct sibling, it will not have the styles. This H6 had the styles because it was inside the div. In short, it was an adjacent, it was a general sibling with the paragraph element. And that is how you can use the general sibling selector. That is it with the combinator selectors. So the next selector that we look at is the attribute selector. So you can see here the attribute selector selects elements based on an attribute or attribute value. And that is what we look at today. So let's go to the attribute selector. So the first, we'll talk about this, that selects the attribute, not that. Start looking at the attribute first. So I can just put any element. Let's say I put, which element? Let me just use the anchor link. This one, a link. Then say it has an attribute of target. Let's say target blank. Then I'll just put here to say, let's say it's the first. I'll just put two links. Then I'll call this one second, and this will be target cell. that. So you can see I have two links here that don't go anywhere, but I have two links, the first and the second link. And you know, by default, links are blue in color and they're underlined. That's the default styling of the links. We talked about links when we we're talking about HTML, and we saw the default types of links. So I have two types. I have two links here, and they have the target attribute and different values. But now looking at the attribute selector, first we're selecting this target attribute. So I'll go to the browser and I'll select the element then which has an attribute selector of target. That is how you select an attribute. So use the square brackets, this square brackets here. Then inside the square bracket you put the attribute name, like mine is target. So the anchor element has a target attribute. So for example, I had an anchor element that, let me remove this target here to the second one. So let's say the first one has a target and the second does not have. That means I've selected the first link only. So here if I put styles here, I'll be styling the first link because you can see the second link does not have that target attribute. So I'll just say you should put text. You know that by default the links are underlined, so I want to remove that underline there. So I'll select text decoration none. We talked about this already. And also want to change the color. By default it's always blue, so I want my link to be, let's say, red. So let's go to the browser and see how that is. So if you go to the browser, you can see only the first link is styled because you use the attribute select to select the link that has the target attribute. This other one was not styled because it didn't have the target attribute. So unless you put the target attribute to the second one, it won't have any styles. So that is how you have styled your link to have a red color and to remove the underline using text decoration none. And that is how you use the attribute selector using the square brackets. So let's look at the attribute value selector. So you have seen the attribute selector, how that works. There is the other one called attribute value selector. So let me just return the target attribute here. So that means now all our two links will take these styles. All of them will not have an underline and all of them will be color red. But now I want to style a specific link. I'll use the target value. I'll use the attribute value selector. So the attribute is target, and we do not have this target. Then target is equals to, I put the value there. Only let me just copy this. Let me copy this one here. And to style the second one, so I'll just copy that. I'll paste it here like that. So you can say I put the attribute and the value inside the square brackets. Here you only put the attribute only, so it's selected all elements that have that attribute. Now this one will select all elements that have this attribute, and that attribute is set to this value. So the attribute is target, the value is self. So if it has that, I'll just put a background color of brown of that. I don't know, let's keep that one. So let's go to the browser and see how that is. So if you go to the browser, you can see, oh, the background color is not set. Let me just inspect and see something. The second element, let me just look at it. It has a background color, but it's not visible. I think this color is not. Let me try to put blue. Yeah, the Alice blue was not visible. You can see the background color is set. So I put the background color, as you can see in the developer options. I selected this element using the target self. The first element, as you can see, the first element has the target attribute, but the target is blank. So it selected only the element that has a target of self and set the background color to be blue, as you can see in the browser. The previous color was Alice blue. I think Alice blue and white are similar, so it was not visible. But if you put a different color like blue, you can see now it's visible, and that is how you use the attribute value selector. And that is it with the attribute selectors. But you can see here in the notes it's saying research more on attribute selectors, because there's some attribute selectors that have this sign like the tilde here, and it means a different thing. Some you can set this one to mean a different thing, others you can set this one to mean a different things. So those are some of the options that we did not cover here. and you can research. But these two that we covered are the most used selectors that I've seen. The other ones are used, but they're not commonly used, so you can just research on them. We can just continue by learning the pseudo-class selectors. So if you go here at the top, you can see the pseudo-class selectors select elements based on a certain state. So this pseudo-class selectors select elements based on a state. So the elements must have some state. So look, you can see here, select elements based on a certain state. A pseudo-class is used to define a special state of an element. For example, if it's a link, you can style the link. You can style an element when a mouse is over it. You can style a visited and unvisited links differently, and you can style an element when it gets focus. So I'll just use this link as an example. So let me come here. I'll just remove this link, leave only the first link, and maybe I can put a real link, janjaprogrammers.com. But I think I have to have www dot here. Yeah, I think this one will work. Blank is okay. So I have a link here that I'll just change the text. I'll see if I click to go to JP website, like that. So I have a link that takes you to janjaprogrammers website. So I'll style that link. Let me just comment this target style because I want to restyle my link to use these pseudo-class selectors. So I've said pseudo-class selector styles an element based on certain state. So this link has some various states. The first state is the unvisited state. We talked about these states when we're talking about the links. When we're talking about links, we talk about these various states that a link can have. So for me to put the pseudo-class selector, I'll use the full colon, just a single colon. Then I'll put the state like that. You can use any selector here. I'm using the element selector so that it can be simple, but you can use any selector. You can use the class selector, the parent, the child selector, any selector that you can use. But I'm just using the element selector so that it can be. I'm talking about this first part here. You can see something like, let's say, div, then a, like that. But I'm just using just a for it to be simple. This other part that has a colon and the state, that is the pseudo-class selector. So I'll just put like that. So that is my link, and the color for my link, if it is unvisited, it should have a red color. I'll use the hex for that color. It's red. Yeah. So by default, you say that a link by default when it's just in the browser, it's unvisited. So when I go to the browser, my link should be red in color. So when someone visits the link, and the color to change. So this will be the visited state. So when one clicks on the link and the link to change the color to, I'll just put the state to be visited like that. So you can see here the state was link to mean the default state, that is the unvisited state. So if the link is visited, the state will change from link to visited. I think you are following that. So I'll put here the color, and then if the link is visited, the color should be green. So green is in hex, it's FF00 like that. So you can see I'm using the hex code to change the colors. So the next state is when someone hovers a mouse over the link. It's called mouse over state. Mouse over. This state, when someone places the mouse over that link. So also when someone hovers, that state is called hover. This one hover. So when someone hovers their mouse and the color to change also. I missed the spelling of color. So I want the color to be this color, FF00FF. That color. There's another state when someone clicks on that link. That is the active state. or just the selected, let's say selected state. When someone clicks on that link, so it's here, they have selected, then that state is called active, like that, active. And then when someone clicks that link, the color to be blue. Color to be blue. So blue in hex is this one, FF, no, not FF, 0000, then FF, that is blue in hex code. So you can see here, I have styled an element, the same element, just the link element. I have styled it differently based on certain states. So by default, the link will be red in color. Then when someone hovers on that link, it will be this color. I think I'm not sure which color this is. Then when someone clicks that link, it should be blue. Then when someone has already visited that link and comes back to it, it should be green. So let's go to the browser and confirm that. Let me save this and also save this one. So let me go to the browser and confirm. So if you go to the browser, you can see that the link is red in color. That is the default styles that we put with that link so that you can confirm. I've already clicked on it. So the link was red in color. Let me close this one. You can see that it's green because I've already clicked on it. But it was red in color. That was the initial state. It was red. Then when I click on it, now it's already clicked. That's why it's green. But the initial one was red in color. I clicked on it here by mistake, and you can't undo that state. So it was red. Well, now that I've clicked on it, you can see it has visited janjaprogrammers website. This is the janjaprogrammers website. It was red. Now that I've clicked on it, it is now green. And when I hover my mouse on it, you can see this color. I think this is, I'm not sure, I think it's violet color. When I hover on it, it's violet. And when I click on it, it will, that is the selected or the active state. It will be, which color did you select for the active state? I forgot. Which color did you select for the active state? Where is it? Can't see, but I think we selected it to be blue. So when I click on it, let me click on it. You can see it's blue for some time before it opens the website. So it's blue for some time, then it opens the website. So you have to be keen with that. Active state takes just a short time. I think you've seen it. You can just slow the video for you to see that blue state. And that is how you can set different styles depending on the state. That's how you can style an element differently depending on the state the element is in. And you have seen that in action. So now let us look at the other selector, that is the pseudo-element selector. This was the pseudo-class selector. Now let us look at the pseudo-element selector. So you already looked at the pseudo-class selector. So the next one is the pseudo-element selector. And this pseudo-element selector, you can see in the notes, they select and style part of an element, not the whole element, just part of it. And let us see how that can be in action. Let's go to the notes here, down here. You can see here it is pseudo-element selectors here. So you can use these elements to select and style part of an element. Let us see that in action by using this first 9 pseudo-element. So I'll go to my HTML. Below the link, I'll put a paragraph, and I have already copied some text online, the lorem ipsum text. Then I'll paste it there. You can just go to your browser and search for lorem ipsum text, or you can just put any text. It does not have to be. It is not a must to you put this text. If you can type, you can just type any text inside here, or you can just copy any text and paste. I just use this lorem ipsum text. So I've put that paragraph there. So let me say I want to style this first line pseudo element selects the first line of that paragraph, only the first line. Let us see how that is in action. So I'll use the pseudo, I'll say P, then I'll put this double colon. So you can notice the difference between the pseudo class and the pseudo elements. The pseudo elements, they have the double colon thing. I think you've seen this double colon. This one was just a single colon for the class, but the element is double colon. Then I'll use the first line. You can see all of these ones are the pseudo elements selectors, but we'll just look at a few of them. So P, then first line. You can see there's also first letter, but we'll talk about the first line first. So for example, let us look at this example in the notes. If you need to start the first line, Let's say I want the first line to have a different color. Let's say I want the first line to have a color of green. Let me save the code. So here, let's go to the browser and see how that is. So if you go to the browser, you can see that this is the whole paragraph. The paragraph starts from here and goes all the way till down there. But you can see only the first line of that paragraph is styled. Maybe I change the color because you can confuse with these other styles. Let me put another F here so that I can put a different shade of that color. No, I've changed, let me just refresh. I have changed the color of the, let me select the paragraph, this one. This is the one that I want to change the color. Because the color is similar to the other elements, so that you don't confuse. Let me just put another color there. I think that is not visible. I'll just add another F here. Or let me put, which color should I put? Let me put just a blue color. Yeah, I think that is unique, so that it does not resemble the other ones. So you can see this. If I expand it, any text that appears in the first line will be styled. Then you can see that this text, once it is in the first line, it will be styled. But once I reduce the screen and put this text in the second line, you can see it's no longer styled, because that selector selects only the first line of that element. In this case, the element is a paragraph. So the first line of that element is the only one that will be styled. So if I zoom out, you can see if I zoom out to 100, that is 100 there. So you can see all this first line is, all of it is styled to be blue. And that is how you use the first line pseudo element. And you have seen how pseudo elements select only part of an element. So let us look at another one. Let's look at another example. So let us look at another example, that is the before. There's this before pseudo element. So near the before. So the before is used to add content before the paragraph. You can see that here you can see our paragraph starts with lorem ipsum. So if you had to add some content here before this lorem ipsum, you can add using the before element. So look at this before. So I'll just say p, then before, then I'll use the content. Let's say the property is content, then I'll put the content that I want. You can see in the example they put an image here, but I'll just put some text. I'll say this text, this is added text. So before you go to the browser, let's learn about this after, because the before is similar to this after. So I've said that the before adds some content before the element, and also after adds some content after the element. So I'll just duplicate this one, and instead of before, I'll say after. Like that. So this is added text. I'll say here before. This is added text. I'll say here after. You can just write anything, but I'm trying to put so that you can see the difference between the text. So let's save this code and go to the browser and see how that is. So if you go to the browser, let me just zoom it in. Let me zoom this little bit in so that you can see it clearly. Let me zoom it to 500. So you can see our paragraph was starting from lorem ipsum. But now there's this one. This is the text added before the element. This text is added before the element using the pseudo element selectors. The before pseudo element added this paragraph, and also we use the after to add this text here after. You know, our paragraph ended at lorem ipsum, but now there's this one. This is the text added after the element. You can see it's here, and that is how you can add some content before and after any element. It does not have to be a paragraph. You can add, and also it does not have to be a text. You can also add an image or anything before or after, but I used an example of text because you're talking about paragraphs here. So I had to put the text so that someone can see it clearly, that this text is added before it and this is added after. So that is how you use the pseudo element selectors. So let's look at the final example before we can close the class. The example of these pseudo elements that we look at is this marker. And this marker selects something maybe in a list. It selects things in a list, so I'll just have to create a list. Let me create the list before the paragraph. I create an ordered list there. Then my list will have some items. So I'll show you a shortcut for writing those items. I'll just say li. Then I'll put times. If I want 4 items, I'll say times 4, like that. And they'll come 4 li elements. So I'll say this is the first item. I'll say 1. I'll say 2. I'll say 3. Say 4, like that. So if I want to use this marker, let me just copy this code here. This marker is used to select any link that is there. So if I don't put any elements before to select any list. But if I want to specify a specific list, I can just specify. But in this case, I'll just use it like that as it is there in the notes. And I'll just save. So you can see it in the, let's just look it in the browser and see how that happened. So if you go to the browser, you can see you have our ordered list here, and the list, these markers are colored red, and that is how the marker element, that is how the marker works. So if I change the color of this marker here, I say maybe blue, the color will change to blue. And also you can see the font size. If I put the font size maybe to be 30 pixels, you can see it will be, the markers will be huge. And that is how you can, 3 pixels will be very small. And that is how you can style part of that element using this pseudo element selector. And that is it for today's class, guys. I think now we are finished learning about selectors. There are no more selectors, but as I said before, these selectors that you have learned are the most used ones. For example, these pseudo element selectors, we have just looked at just 4 examples, but there are many examples out there. So you can just go and search for those examples, and you can see how they are used. But as long as you have an idea of how pseudo elements are used and you know the syntax, as you said, the syntax is two full colons. So if you see 2 full colons, you know that is a pseudo element selector. If you see 1 full colon, that is a pseudo class selector. And a class styles an element based on a certain state, and an element styles, and a pseudo element selector styles an element, styles a specific part of an element. I think that is clear. So if you are interested in learning about more of this, you can just research in the internet, and that is how we learn. So that is it for today's class, guys. See you in the next class.